Today is day 2 of the January 91 7-day retreat in Springwater. We will do as we have done over the last several retreats, which is read all the questions that I have jotted down. People have found that very helpful, not just to hear 1 or 2 questions, but many. And let me just say, these are not taken down verbatim. I write them down whenever I find some time to do so. Very often it has happened that 2 or 3 people asked a very similar question. So the question that I write down, if I hadn't written the previous ones down yet, is a composite of the 3. I'm saying this so that you don't feel that your question hasn't been expressed completely or accurately. The important thing is not what is my question, but can the question, however it has been phrased by the time it comes out, can it float for all of us? Not as mine or your question, it's a question that concerns all of us. At least I hope it does. Can anything happen to change our conflicts with each other on the small as well as on the global level, unless we human beings can sit together in silence? I don't just mean discuss things together, but also sit together in silence. We are all heavily conditioned. Do we have to become ever more conditioned as we live on? Or can there be a way of living without becoming conditioned by it? The sense of me always seems to be there, and is connected with feelings of pride, with being something, wanting to be someone, wanting to be important, or being ashamed of myself, guilty, feeling bad about myself. Whatever I do, the way I walk, stand, put my foot out, say something, there's always some posturing. It's always me. And there seems to be no way out of it. Why is it so difficult to completely be with something in oneself or with someone else? It seems one constantly wants oneself and others to be like we want them to be. Meaning other than what they are or what I am. Can things that one discovers about oneself drop immediately? Or does one have to take time with it? I belong to an organization of a spiritual nature in which there is much competitiveness. I don't want to live with all that comparison anymore. Should I leave the organization, live alone? Or is that a new form of alienation from the people I like? It seems paradoxical that on the one hand, You say, be with what is, without judgment, without finding fault. And on the other hand, you say or imply that war is wrong. If one is to look at what comes up in oneself without judgment, without doing anything about it, is one to look at war activity, also without judgment, without doing anything, without saying it is wrong. What is this complete listening and looking that you talk about? I am and always have been an achiever, and I find that I bring up my kids in the same way. How does this fit into the work we are doing here? Maybe we can start with a question which came up not just once. What is this listening, this complete listening? Looking, attending. The question also came, how can it come about? How can I bring it about? But we don't want to touch that question right now, or maybe not at all. We'll just wonder what this listening is. Which is not our habitual listening through what we want to hear, what we don't want to hear or are afraid to hear, not through comparison, through all the ideas we have about what somebody or something is. That's how we listen, isn't it? What we want to hear, we listen to. What we don't want to hear, or what threatens us, we don't listen. Or we listen so scantily that we misunderstand. Don't hear the whole thing that the person says. All of us are very opinionated. We hear through our opinions, sort of scanning what is said, whether it fits what we want to believe in, what we believe is so, what our opinion is so. Wanting to hear ourselves confirmed in our opinions and beliefs may distort what someone says. One thinks the person is confirming it. One hears it that way. One could swear one heard it that way, because one wants to hear so badly what agrees with what one is identified with, because we are identified with our opinions and beliefs. Which means, in brief, the belief, the opinion is part of me, as though it was part of my body and mind. Part of what the whole defense system that this body is capable of, defense, wants to maintain, have survived. Me and my opinions and beliefs. There are other things we identify with, but we want to keep it as simple as possible. Can one question that, watch that, the identification with one's opinions. Identification meaning, this is me. What I just said is me out there. As though I had to defend a limb, an arm or a leg, a head, from being hurt. And with that identification with our opinions and beliefs, we can't listen clearly to what someone says, because the defense system filters or keeps out whatever information may be there in the air. Somebody has said something, but I hear it not at all or in a distorted way. The blood is already rushing to the head, the heart starts beating. When these opinions that I consider to be mine are attacked, are not agreed with, and with that physical ongoing of narrowing down of senses, the concentration upon defense and attack makes this listening impossible. Can one observe that as it happens? Not say it shouldn't happen. She says it shouldn't happen, it's bad. We don't say that. We're drawing attention to what happens. Not as something bad or despicable or admirable, but as something to be watched, to be discovered as it happens. And this is what talks like this, or discussions, or private meetings are very helpful. They help becoming aware of things that otherwise we may not be aware of. Because things that we have done and everybody else is doing since time immemorial is not something we necessarily give attention to, because it runs smoothly, even though there's pain in it, upset, argument and conflict. By which, please, I'm not saying that these talks and meetings are the only occasion at which attention can happen. Something is. There are many, many places that mention things, books, people. Groups, meetings, lectures, and so forth. Something is helpful if one doesn't just listen to it and manipulate it intellectually, but becomes aware of something that's actually happening in oneself and in one's relationship with someone else. And that in this awareness there is the spirit of discovery, of seeing something to be so, to be true. And with that comes real energy and joy. Usually not upset over the way one is, but joy at discovering something about oneself, not just personally, but we are like everyone else in our identification with opinions and defense of them and attack on others. And therefore the impossibility in that case of listening completely, openly, undefendedly, which means, doesn't it, not to be identified with oneself as having these beliefs, these backgrounds, these opinions. Association with nationality, with ideology, movements, religion, creeds. All of this identification prevents the clarity of simple, open listening. Because what we are identified with, this organism is conditioned to defend, as though it was part of it. Organism, brain is conditioned to assure the survival of itself. This is part of, immanent in all life. Everything alive wants to live and continue to live and protect itself. And protecting this organism has a definite function. But protecting our opinions and beliefs and whatever all we are psychologically, ideologically, religiously identified with doesn't protect the organism. On the contrary, it creates division among us, antagonism, defense camps and attacking camps. Not just on the national, global level, but in our small spheres in which we live. Don't we like to find somebody who also agrees with us and will join in the defense of our shared opinions and beliefs? Whatever movement or stuff we're identified with. It's easier to be a few than to stand alone in that. So we, one could almost say, instinctively band together to defend as well as to attack. Because there's more strength in numbers. More bodies together can fight more. And we can pool our thought strength to strengthen our opinions together, to confirm each other. All of this produces energy, shared energy, which is not the shared energy of listening, without defense, without identification. Without feeling in a camp together, sitting together in openness, undefined, unlimited in what is possible. So in listening, what is this listening? Someone says. Is there reaction coming up as something is seen or heard? Maybe for a brief moment there's just the sound, just the sight. Before this is transmitted through all the interpreting and reacting centers in the body-mind. We label it what it is that already has not just a habitual function. It gives one security to know what something is, to have a word for it. And that historically has survival function, to communicate to children, to each other, what is dangerous. But here we're asking, because we're not concerned with our survival. Our survival is fully assured right now, as fully as it can, barring an earthquake or furnace blowing up, who knows. But here we're sitting in extraordinary safety compared to the rest of the world. We don't have to defend ourselves. There's good food here. Rest and unusually fresh air. No one is carrying arms or weapons of terror. So here we sit together, quietly, openly. Can we listen without reaction, defense? Or hear the defense that comes up, feel it? Feel the resistance that crystallizes or makes itself felt, that manifests. Be in touch with it in a fresh way, not in an habitual way. If it's a habitual way, then there'll be resistance. But if it's fresh, then this resistance comes into light, into awareness. It's listened to, it's felt. And with that, its habitual course is interrupted and maybe need not continue. Because we're not threatened physically. Can one listen without resistance? Seeing the resistance, feeling it, and yet not being caught up in it? Without judgment? Needing so quickly to evaluate, this is good, this is bad, this is right or wrong. I like this, I hate that. I'll keep this, but I reject that. I want this to continue, but I can't live with that. All of these reactions are programmed into this body-mind, and nothing to be ashamed of or mad about or despairing of. It needs to be seen, felt, touched. Not as something to be fought or battled. Really seeing something is enough. Because if there's an open, defenseless awareness that has its own intelligence, which acts, that intelligence doesn't say this is good, this is bad. It sees what narrows, what hinders, what divides, what darkens. It sees that and ends that. So this question came up, something like this, yesterday in the group. Why is it so difficult to be with oneself, to be with each other? Which means hearing what somebody says, seeing what somebody does, becoming aware what's going on in oneself, without wanting it to be otherwise. Without immediate judgment and not withdrawal from it and thinking it should be differently, judging it, condemning it, rejecting it. Is that a vital question for us. We were saying earlier, we're not threatened here physically. As far as we know, we're safe here. So what are we trying to defend when we can't be with each other? Or with ourselves, without any resistance? Without any reaction for or against? Without judgment, without wanting this anxiety not to be there, or this pain to be turn into no pain. Without wanting this other person to be friendly or liking me, saying different things, being different. Why is it so difficult? What are we maintaining or defending that gets in the way? Is there something we're maintaining and defending and clinging to that takes up space and divides, creates a gulf? Inside and in our relationship with each other. One person said, whatever I do, sit, walk, put this foot out, say something, it's always posturing, this person said. Always me. And there seems to be no way out of it. And another one saying very similar. Everything coming from this me self-center. I'm observing it. I look deeper and there's still me wanting, me fearing. We're not saying it's wrong or bad, we're looking at it. Because we're trying to find what's in the way of this open listening in which there's no distortion. What makes for this feeling? We're starting very early with this. Usually it takes several days before we ask this, but it doesn't matter. What makes for this feeling of meanness, selfness, I-ness? What makes for this feeling? What makes me say, whatever I do, I'm posturing? I want to be something, want to become someone important. One person, I always want to be somebody. It becomes the clearer the awareness, the more subtle are these movements, and they can be discovered. Already wanted to be somebody again. I just said something, and I want to be something. How does that happen, becoming somebody? Is that something we just have to say? It is so, it's unobservable, it's sort of a magical process. It's just human nature. Or can we wonder whether that can be tracked, caught, as it happens? Because we are walking, we are putting a foot forth, we're sitting down, we're eating, listening, talking, all of that. Does that necessarily involve the posturing of a me? The awareness that this is me? Or the thought is not? But let's not use awareness of that for that. Can one walk and eat and drink, sit down, get up, without trying to be something or somebody. And not being so lost in other thoughts that one is just unaware, sort of daydreaming about something else. Then there may not be posturing in this eating or walking or putting the foot out, but the mind is busy with something else. What happened to me yesterday, or what is happening in the Persian Gulf. But we're asking again, is it possible to get up, sit down, walk, put a foot out, spoon up the soup, chew the bread, take a walk, breathe the fresh air, without posturing? Let's drop the word posturing and rather find out what is going on when this word is used. There is thought involved in that, isn't there? Thinking about me putting my foot out, me eating, me having just said something. And with that thought, as with any thought, goes so quickly the evaluation. I did that well. Or I'm not doing that well. I'm too this, or too much this, too little that. The thought process accompanying what the organism is engaged in. And making something out of it by creating a line, a storyline, or a continuous story about myself, in which I'm either very inferior, trying to become superior, or very superior, afraid of others passing me. I'm just picking this out. I'm not saying this is so for everyone, but something is so for everyone. So can one become aware of how and that we talk to ourselves very quickly, maybe. Maybe I find it very observable, but maybe it's not so observable. Unless one begins to look and pay attention to it. In pictures and words and ideas, think about ourselves. And thinking that there is someone who is thinking, that there is someone who is doing something, that there is an actor, that there is for everything there is someone who is originating that or responding. That's thought. Maybe I shouldn't say it so emphatically. That maybe provokes resistance and doesn't encourage or kindle looking for oneself. So let's rather say, what is that? That thinker. The thinker of the thoughts. Because that's what we believe, that there is a thinker of thoughts. A knower of the knowledge. A doer of the deed. And the more we think about that thinker and that knower and that doer, that painter or that writer, that skier or whatever, the more we embellish that figure in thought, either positively or negatively. And as identification with this creation in the mind. This is me, we say. And it's not just thinking and image and picture and thought. It's connected with all the emotions and sensations that this organism is capable of, which lends this idea of me such incredible credibility, validates it, the fact that there's great emotion involved when I think about myself as being great, as being poor, good or bad. It's accompanied with instant emotions all over the body. Maybe each emotion has its favorite center in the body. That it ignites into action. And when that ignition takes place, me being threatened, me being disbelieved or criticized or flattered, then there's no pure listening possible. Because this inner ignition and all that comes of it, all the movements of chemicals and muscles and organs and whatever, doesn't prevent the relaxed listening without reaction. In sitting down quietly, can there be relaxation? Or rather, awareness of all the tensions? Physical, emotional, whatever. Awareness of them. Without wanting them to go away. Just awareness. Awareness is some altogether different process from our habitual thinking about ourselves, which is always connected with wanting it to be otherwise or wanting it to keep that way, to stay that way. But just aware of tension needs no reaction, it needs nothing. And in that, a healing or dropping away is possible. Not through any intention or resolve or willpower. All of that belongs to thinking about ourselves and how we should be or shouldn't be. Awareness has no intentions, no willpower. Has nothing. It's just light, if you will, which reveals what is there. Not artificial light like fireworks. Just stillness in the midst of what is. Without going to sleep. Alert, aware, open, undefended. Not identified with an idea of me. That can completely quiet down. That idea of me. It seems impossible. I know. One has wondered in years gone by whether this self-consciousness could ever come to an end. It seems absolutely impossible. Because it seems to be the song of our life to sing about ourselves. But it has no vital function. Even though the body responds to keeping this me alive just as it does to keep the organism alive. That's where the confusion comes in brain and body, to take that for real. But it serves no function to think about oneself. But it creates tremendous conflict, sorrow, pride, elation, feelings of aggrandizement or total depression, or badness. My people, my folk, and my adversaries. All comes from these structures built by brain and body. Which, as real as they seem, are ephemeral. Can one not know what listening is and just listen? It's no effort, it's just listening. Looking, feeling. Silently with what's there. Reactions coming up, see them. That's all. The breathing is there, isn't it? And hearing someone breathe. The heart is beating. There's sensation in the hands, on the thighs, or touching each other, in the knees and the seat. Coolness. It's so quiet, isn't it? Thoughts? Are there thoughts? That's all they are. Thoughts about myself? Are there? That's thoughts about myself. That's thoughts. Pictures. Feelings with it? That's what it is. Feelings about myself. But can there be listening? It needs nothing. We will end here for today.